welcome to All Steelers Talk, your home for everything Pittsburgh Steelers, presented by allsteelers.com.
What is up, Steelers Nation? It is finally NFL Draft Weekend. I'm pumped up about it. I already see we got some people in here. I know y'all are pumped. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to talk everything NFL Draft, everything Pittsburgh Steelers as we, wait for this thing to get kicked off tonight at 8 o'clock. So first off, Nick, how we doing, brother?
Oh, my goodness, man. It's finally here. We get to see who the Steelers take and all this craziness with these draft rumors, what's going to happen at the top of the draft. It's going to make for some very fun entertainment overall.
Yeah, dude, I'm so stoked, man. This is, like I said, if you guys follow the draft podcast, you could probably tell it. But me and Nick, man, this is like our favorite weekend of the year, and like I just get so excited. I got company coming over later. I got a little bit of sleep today after putting the final touches on all of my big board stuff and all that stuff. So really excited to talk some ball with you guys. First off, I got this I have to mention this. I have this 2005 NFL draft on in the background, and just seeing all these running backs fly off the board is just utterly hilarious. But, some of these players that ended up falling a little bit in the draft, like DeMarcus Ware, Sean Merriman, guys like that, like I kind of, it's giving me a little bit of optimism for maybe the Steelers getting lucky tonight and somebody like that falling in their laps. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, man, like what are we? I think we've got to start, even if it's not necessarily all Steelers related. I think we have to start at the top of the draft, the chaos that is ensuing. Bryce Young seems like he's going to go number 1, but who knows what's going to happen at 2? Houston's been a complete wild card. Arizona, they've been a kind of a lock to potentially trade down, acquire some more draft capital.
Breaking news, by the way, 5-year deal, $260 million from Lamar Jackson. He's the new highest paid quarterback in the league.
Sheesh. Hey, good from Lamar. Get that bag, man.
Yes, sir.
Well, that takes quarterback off the board for Baltimore in a wild place. So, no, but like that's just it's going to be crazy to see how it all plays out because I think at 3 with the Cardinals, there's been some smoke around potentially Kyler Murray wanting to throw like Paris Johnson's name in the mix there for them. Who knows if that means at 3, if that means in a slight trade down with Indianapolis or Vegas or something like that. But, Paris Johnson's been a guy that has, the Steelers have spent a ton of time on in the pre-draft process, formal visit at the combine. They sent the house to the Ohio State Pro Day. He checks a lot of boxes in terms of, what could potentially be the, franchise left tackle prototype. But like, how do you see this? How do you see the first couple picks of this draft playing out, man? Do you want to give me a prediction?
Predicting this is going to be very difficult because I do think the Cardinals are looking at Paris Johnson pretty closely. I think they do want to trade down, but the teams that are wanting to trade up are more in the teens area. Guys like the Eagles, the Titans, Texans, they're very much in the running for potentially CJ Stroud and trying to jump the Colts in that regard. So it's very difficult to say. I think after that it gets a little bit more clear, but the top at number 3, it could be like as high as Paris Johnson at 3, or it could be like CJ Stroud in a trade up. Could I see us trading up for Paris Johnson? It's actually very possible. It depends on whether or not the Cardinals end up taking him as early as they do, because I do think the Falcons would want to trade down to try and get a guy like Bijan Robinson later, as opposed to taking him at like number 8, which I don't think they want to do. So honestly, it's possible. I wouldn't necessarily be a huge fan of it because I do think the tackles are a little closer than people expect. And for me, the only offensive lineman I'd want to move up for is Peter Skoronski, despite the fact he's a guard. I think he's going to be an all-pro guard. So that's just how I feel.
Yeah, I was sitting there because I've been watching all these old NFL draft videos on YouTube in the background while I've been finishing this draft prep. But I was watching like the first round of the 2012 draft where David DeCastro fell all the way to the Steelers because he was a guard. Pretty much that was it. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, like this is the hopium in me. I was like, man, what if Skoronski fell to 17?
Yes.
You talk about, I know that, I know he's a guard in my opinion. I know that's not like a premium position, but dude, Skoronski is just so technically sound. And I just think that he's going to be an absolute baller at the next level. He was a top 5 player on my big board. So he would definitely be somebody I'd be ecstatic to get at 17, positional value aside. But I love seeing all these comments in here, man. Y'all are hyped for the draft, and I'm really hyped as well. So, let's talk a little bit about what happens after that. Do we think that my question is, do we think all 4 quarterbacks go before 17? Because I really think that is something to keep an eye on. I think it's likely, in my opinion, that all 4 quarterbacks go, but I wanted to see what you thought, because 4 quarterbacks going in the top 17 means someone else is getting pushed down to the Steelers.
So for me, I think a lot of it has to deal with the Colts at 4 because there's smoke around Will Levis. Some people think it's a ruse for their interest in Anthony Richardson, and there's a lot of plugged in Colts, analysts, guys like Zach Hicks. They believe they've heard more about Anthony Richardson than it being Will Levis.
Mm-hmm.
I think Will Levis could either go somewhere at 12 to like the Texans, or he could potentially fall even further than that, because I'm not sure the NFL, or at least other teams like Will Levis, as much. The Colts feel very strongly about him based off the buzz, but I don't know how true all that buzz is about him. I do think we'll see 3 though go before number 17.
Yeah, I'm gonna call my shot. I do think all 4 is gonna go. I hope that's the case because like I said, that's gonna push other talent down, and that's definitely gonna be a good thing for the Steelers. But I think that's definitely something to watch. All these different teams, it's weird because even though the Texans, there's been some rumors out there that they may not take a quarterback, but there's other teams, not like the Colts, who were almost positive is going to take one. There's teams like Vegas, who I think would like to take one if they're in position to take one. But then there's other teams, I think, in the top 10 that are also like big question marks in this whole debacle, right? Let's talk about Seattle at 5 or Seattle at 20. Could they come back up if a quarterback starts to slide that they like? They got Geno Smith, who played extremely well last year, but are they considering him like the future and not just the present? Who knows? And then I think really the total wild card that could set this thing aflame is Detroit, because I think Detroit is going to take Devin Witherspoon at 6. But what if they took like Anthony Richardson, or what if they liked one of these quarterbacks enough and said like, all right, Jared Goff, like we know we can have a top 5 offense with him, but we know he's not like a game breaker, like elevate the rest of the roster type player, and we view one of these other guys like that. And then Witherspoon, that pushes him down. So that could be an interesting scenario. Do you think, let's say, do you think Seattle, Detroit, or Vegas, you think any of those teams take a quarterback?
I think if Vegas moves up, it'll be for a guy like Stroud, because I think they view the top 2 much closer, and they think there's a drop off after that, as opposed to like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. I think Richardson, for me, like if you look at Seattle and you look at Detroit, those are the perfect landing spots for him, because Jared Goff, they have a freeze in contract negotiations going on right now to give them draft flexibility. And they have, he's on an expiring deal, and they have so much draft capital to be able to move up and secure their guy. It's definitely very possible they could do that. Like Seattle, they're picking high, and they don't pick this high normally, and it's because of that that trade with Russell Wilson with the Broncos that had them that high of a pick. So it's really tough to say, but if I was in their shoes, I would be taking Anthony Richardson if I was them. I do think they would regret not coming away with a quarterback as opposed to coming away with a quarterback, because I think it's a risk you can take at this juncture, considering they have that flexibility. Now, Jalen Carter, obviously, I understand taking a guy like that at number 5 and number 6 if he ends up, going in that direction. But I would go with the quarterback I feel comfortable with that I can develop. And everything I've read about from Anthony Richardson tells me he not only wants to be great, he's made so much good progress on his footwork. And I think it was noticeable even during combine week when he was throwing, him and CJ Stroud were throwing back to back. And I thought Richardson actually was showing a lot better touch and accuracy than he had in prior in prior iterations, back with Florida. So I definitely get it. I would go in that direction, but it's hard to say exactly what they do.
Yeah. I think, like I said, Detroit, man, like, for one, I want to ask you this because I tweeted this earlier. It does seem like Detroit really likes Devin Witherspoon, and I don't know if that's specifically I don't know if that's necessarily a universal feeling across the league, but it does seem like a lot of well-placed sources are saying that they like Devin Witherspoon over Christian Gonzalez. Does that surprise you? I'm going to be honest. I think it surprises me a little bit, and I really like Devin Witherspoon. Like during this season, I think November-ish, I was talking about him, as, maybe sliding into the first round. I didn't know how he would test. I know he's really light, so I didn't know how the NFL would feel about him. I'm really surprised, though, that I guess it seems like teams like him more than Christian Gonzalez, because I joked about this when I was on the stream with Zach Smith last night. My one-liner for Gonzalez in my big board was literally like a build a corner with unbelievable hip fluidity. And I just think I look at Gonzalez and I'm like, if you were to build a cornerback for the modern era, he looks like Christian Gonzalez. He moves like Christian Gonzalez. So it's surprising to me that he's not the number one guy. Is that surprising to you?
I don't know if I would say it's surprising because for me, Devin Witherspoon, I feel strongly about his floor as a player. I think he's one of the highest floor players in this class. And obviously there's no such thing as a safe player, even because you can never account for injuries. And sometimes, prospects, they become a little bit different once they get that money in their hands. It's very hard to say, but he ran the 4.45 at his private pro day, and he probably wasn't even training all that much. And the biggest question I had about Devin Witherspoon was the fact that I thought he got beat vertical a little bit too much.
Yep.
And when it comes to that vertical speed, I think it was either him not opening the gate early enough as opposed to maybe that recovery speed, which I think the 40 kind of proves that he has that enough recovery speed to be able to last on the outside. So I get it. And he definitely plays a lot more of an aggressive game than a guy like, Christian Gonzalez. I don't want to necessarily say Gonzalez is a soft guy. I think he very much is willing in a lot of the things he does, but I think there's a lot more coverage upside with him as opposed to a guy like Witherspoon.
When you watch Witherspoon and Gonzalez back to back, I think it makes you think that Gonzalez isn't like really physical, but that's only because Witherspoon plays, like we talked about this.
Exactly.
Witherspoon plays literally every down like it's his last on earth. And it's awesome, but it's just like, that doesn't mean Gonzalez, who I think shows a lot of flashes of physicality that get overlooked. That doesn't mean he's not physical. It just means that he's not a literal psychopath, which is basically what Witherspoon is on the field, who just wants to obliterate anything in his way. I want to answer Matt's question real quick. Do you think a team that isn't drafting tonight will trade into the first round, like Cleveland, Miami, Denver? Cleveland, no, because they don't have any picks until like the 70s. So I would be surprised with their situation if they were to trade up. Miami is interesting to me. I have seen a lot of people say that like Miami might be in the market for like maybe a tight end, maybe one of those running backs in like the second round range. I don't know where their pick is. I'm about to pull up the chart, but they would be interesting to me. Denver would be interesting to me. I know, there's been some talk about maybe like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy on the trade market. So like maybe that happens. I mean, there's a lot of, even though the Aaron Rodgers thing, is finally solved. Thank God I don't have to hear anymore about Aaron Rodgers saga. There's a lot of these veterans that are, I feel like in the mix that could maybe potentially make a splash, like we've heard rumors about DeAndre Hopkins, maybe to the Bills. I know a lot of people are saying the Bills are going to make a splash at 28. Like, do they trade up? Do they trade for a guy like Hopkins? I don't think it's going to require the 28th pick, but
no.
Hopkins. Another name that I wanted to give them a shout out the Athletic draft show with Brugler, Tice, and who's the other guy?
Robert Mays.
Robert Mays. Sorry, Robert.
I
He's
love their stuff.
fantastic host. But Robert Mays said he keeps coming back to Mike Evans. That's a name I think really does need to be talked about, because what's Tampa's plan next year? If you look at the roster looks pretty solid, man. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, like, they've somehow ended up bringing a lot of their guys back. They got like Jamel Dean back. They've restructured some of these contracts. They didn't restructure Mike Evans. He's coming up on 30 years old, I think. Is Baker really going to be the quarterback? Are they going to come up and get Levis? Is Tampa trying to compete next year, or would they be like, hey, if we could get a day 2 pick for Mike Evans, would we want to do that? So he's a name to watch. It'll be fascinating to see. I see Miami at 32 for a boatload. Yeah, I mean, listen, man, Miami, I think, they're going to be all in. I think that they know what they've got, especially like with their weaponry, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, freaking McDaniel's. He's a genius, man. I love that Shanahan stuff, man. But it's really just, the whole thing is definitely going to revolve around Tua's health, though. So that's another thing. Tua's health, and he's coming up on the end of his rookie deal, so it's kind of time to strike while the iron's hot a little bit.
Guy I can actually see Miami moving up for. I know running back is not like very high on the list, but Jahmyr Gibbs fits that wide zone running scheme, just like an absolute glove. Like, and how much the Shanahan scheme, how much they value speed, and a guy like Gibbs would make a lot of sense, especially with his receiving ability. He's awesome in that regard.
Let me wrap to you a name that I kept coming back to. I really struggled to rank this dude. I didn't put him in my top 100, but I really do like watching him run. I know we got a lot of we probably have some Pitt Panthers fans in here. Izzy.
Yeah.
Bro, if Izzy goes to Miami, like third, fourth round, he'll blow up. Like, because I keep coming back to like I don't do a ton of comps, but Mostert.
Yes.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Mostert, like just that straight line speed, that one cut and kind of just go. The only thing with Izzy,
very high cut.
Yes, he's very high cut. Doesn't break a lot of tackles, so that kind of bothered me, and that was why he a little bit lower in my running back rankings because of that. But yeah, Izzy's a great fit there. What's good, Eddie? It's going to be interesting to see what happens. So let's talk about the tackle run. I think we've pretty much both established that this offensive tackle run seems like it's going to be earlier than maybe many were anticipating. That's been the buzz for like the last week. Is that kind of how you see that playing out?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are expecting Darnell Wright to be there at 17. I think he could get sniped at 16 at the Commanders, because they seem to really like him. Even in their ESPN NFL Nation mock draft, where their beat writers take a lot of, they look at like a lot of the guys and they look at some of the buzz. They picked Darnell Wright right there, which I think is very much where he could go. I could also see him going as high as number 9 to the Bears, who seem to like Braxton Jones as their left tackle, and they might like view Darnell Wright more as the right tackle.
Yeah,
it would make a lot of sense for them, especially if they decided to trade down. I was originally looking at them for Broderick Jones, but I think they want a little bit more of a ready tackle, and I think Darnell Wright provides more of that NFL readiness than a guy like Broderick Jones, who I think has a big trap door to his floor.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of things that he needs to clean up overall with his game, but the ceiling is exponentially high.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And that's a good point about what Chicago could potentially be looking at. Braxton Jones did have a solid year. Anytime you get we'll say non-first round, but he went like late day 2, early day 3, right? He went like the 5th round, maybe. But anytime you get like starter quality play, which I thought Braxton Jones showed flashes last year, you got to really take that dub.
Round.
Yeah. And they really, I think with Chicago, we talk about some of these teams needing to get some urgency together. Chicago needs a little bit of urgency. Like, they've got to figure out like what Justin Fields, like if he's the guy. And I think they know that they've got to give him more support. They went out and got DJ Moore, getting a guy getting out there, going and getting a guy like Darnell Wright who can be a plug and play right tackle, maybe doesn't have the ceiling like you mentioned of a guy like Broderick Jones or even Paris Johnson Jr. Even though I would still be surprised if Wright was picked over Paris Johnson, but we'll see what happens there. I think 9 is the start of the tackle run, right? So like let's look at the teams after that. Or do you think somebody before them could take one? Arizona.
I think Arizona at 3 is the
Okay.
very earliest the tackle run could start. Also, them in a trade down if they decide to wait on
Mhm.
Paris Johnson. Let's say like out of nowhere, Detroit trades up to the 3 because they want the quarterback of the future, like a guy like Stroud or an
I
Anthony
didn't even think about
Richardson,
them
and
trading up.
then they take Paris Johnson at like 6. I think Paris Johnson's going to start the tackle run. I think Darnell Wright could be the second tackle off the board, though,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how I have it graded. I didn't think that it was. I still am a little bit skeptical that it actually plays out that way, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you look at just the draft order, right? Chicago's at 9, Philadelphia's at 10. I mean, would it surprise anybody if Philly took a tackle? Like if there was one there? I mean, I don't. I definitely think Skoronski, he could probably slot in there in that spot. I mean, Philly loves the dress in the trenches. Andy Weidel, when he was there, that was their MO. That's been their MO under Howie Roseman. They could take an edge. I think it's going to be someone on the offensive defensive line. Tennessee, if they stay at 11,
Peter
they need
Skoronski,
help. They
Paris
need help
Johnson.
everywhere. I mean, everywhere on the offensive line. I mean, it was really difficult to watch whoever's playing quarterback for them last year because their offensive line was so bad in pass protection.
Yeah.
They need pretty much everything, and they seem headed for a rebuild. But like earlier in the show, when we were talking about potentially teams trading up for quarterbacks, so how the quarterbacks are going to kind of set this draft board, we didn't talk about Tennessee. There's been a lot of smoke about the Titans going up and getting a quarterback, maybe all the way up to like pick 3 with the Cardinals.
I think they like Stroud. Even going back to the pro day last year where Stroud was throwing, they showed a lot of interest in him back then. Stroud's even mentioned it. I remember reading about Mike Vrabel pulling CJ Stroud aside, just like, go take a shower. We're gonna go talk in the locker room and stuff like that. And I think that's a type of quarterback Vrabel would want to have. He wants an accurate type quarterback. And the problem with the Titans, even for the 2024 quarterback class, they have similar issue that Pittsburgh has, where Mike Vrabel is one of those coaches. They're not going to be in a position where they're consistently drafting so low that they can't capitalize on like the top quarterback market, guys like Caleb Williams, potentially Drake May. So they might feel that sense of urgency to move up and get a guy like Stroud. If not, I see them addressing the trenches with Skoronski. I think that's where the earliest that Skoronski could go. Maybe the Eagles, but I think they're looking more at an edge rusher there.
Yeah. Lights can television. I'm down here in KC now, my 17th NFL draft. Man, you're lucky. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'd be ready to run through a wall if I was actually there in person. I've never been to an NFL draft in person.
Same.
I don't know if I'm gonna get to go to one now that I'm doing a lot more content. But that's awesome, man. Have a good time. Where are we at? Okay, so tackle run. Tennessee, man, they're a complete wild card. Houston at 12. I feel like everything that we thought we knew about Houston can just be thrown out the window. Just because they're just kind of a complete wild card at this point. But like you mentioned, I did want to talk one more thing about Vrabel and comparing him a little bit to Tomlin. I do completely agree. Vrabel is one of those guys who's like a floor raiser to me, just like how he unites the locker room, how his teams play. They play hard for him. And then there's the obvious Ohio State connection.
Yes.
Like Vrabel, he would love to get his hands on an Ohio State quarterback. That would be right up his alley. And he would love nothing more than that. So be interested to see what happens there. I don't really necessarily think that the Jets-Packers trade has a ton to do with the Steelers, but there has been. I brought this up last night as well. The Packers are kind of interesting because David Bakhtiari has played very, very little the past 2 seasons, and he seems like he's to the end of his potential run as a pro, or at least in Green Bay with his contract. Green Bay's drafts, at least from what I know of them, they love high caliber athletes. And that was what made me think that they may be in on a guy like Broderick Jones. That could be a spot for him. I was interested to see what you thought of the Jets and Packers swap for those two spots. Like, is there a name that comes to mind which makes you think about why they would potentially want to jump New England like that?
I think it's either Jackson Smith and Jigba or Dalton Kincaid because
Okay.
I think the Packers are looking very hard at receiver and wanting to maximize Jordan Love. As much as I think tackle could be a possibility, they tend to take tackles a lot later and they have a lot of success in that regard. Guy they drafted last year very late or in the mid rounds was Zach Tom, who I was a big fan of. That's a guy I could see starting for them at tackle for them. They added Sean Ryan as well, who was actually a higher pick from UCLA. So I think they have enough guys that they feel more comfortable taking a tackle later. Maybe they take a guy like a Nick Saldiveri, who I think actually fits them really well.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
And with the wide receiver class being as weak as it is overall, taking a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I think is a pretty safe player overall in terms of his floor, just a very solid player, really good off the field, really good hands, give Jordan Love that trusted target. Because the thing about the Packers, they have Christian Watson who can stretch the field, and Romeo Doubs is a promising receiver, but it's hard to say necessarily that he has, the most secure hands overall because he tends to clap on the ball and drop the pass. So they probably want a more shorthanded guy. And what more shorthanded guys can you get than Dalton Kincaid and Jackson Smith and Jigba?
Right. Yeah. No, JSN, man, that was my thing with him is just how quarterback friendly he is. And, you were really early, I feel like, on the Dalton Kincaid love in terms of, first round, but also first tight end potentially off the board. I know that you've called him, the best pass catcher in this class. And I actually, I'm on board with that take. I think that he's pretty freaking special, man. Over 150 career targets at Utah. I think 2 or 4 career drops or something like that.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. I mean, he basically has vacuum cleaners for hands. It's the way that he, can make plays outside of his frame, how, savvy and fluid, I guess. I wouldn't call him overly athletic, but I think he's really fluid.
He's
after the
extremely
catch.
twitched and fluid is
Right.
how I view him. In terms of straight line speed, I don't necessarily think he breaks the sound barrier there, but I
Sure.
don't think he has to because he's just so nuanced in how he gets open. I watch him consistently, the way he manipulates zone leverage and the way on stopping routes, he constantly is he's drifting his route to go into those soft spots and zones. He's so good at that.
JSN does that really well too.
I just think Kincaid is going to produce so quickly if he is not asked to block in line so consistently, because I do think blocking in line is not his game. I do think he can block as a space blocker, pulling out in space a good bit, but I do, just don't make it hard. Just put him in slot receiver.
Yeah.
Keep him.
Let him eat.
Yes, exactly.
Question from Adam. What do you think we need more DB or offensive lineman with the first pick? I'll let you answer that and I'll give kind of my take on that. And if just while we're here, guys, please make sure that you like the video. That helps support the channels. And if y'all have draft questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can as we go while we keep the show moving. But I'll let you answer Adam's question first.
I think defensive back is too deep for, the first pick to be that they need to take that with the first pick. But I do think there's going to be a better prospect there at that position because I do think Deontay Banks, in terms of how I rank him, he's a top 10 prospect on my board. And I don't know if a guy like Skoronski could be there that would match that type of value. And the only tackle actually that I think that they might consider there, because I think Darnell Wright's going to be gone, is Anton Harrison, who I actually like more than most people. I think he has NFL ready hand usage in terms of his ability as a pass protector. He gets high in his pad level as a run defender, so he has a little bit of issues with creating a lot of space in the run game. But he's a powerful dude. He's strong. He's started 3 straight years at the Big 12. And, he started very early too as a freshman, and he just has that hand usage down. He's working with Paul Alexander, who is really refining his technique. I think Anton Harrison has a very solid floor, but at the same time, I think his ceiling is understated in terms of the type of player he could be. I think he could go as high as 19 to Tampa Bay. I really think Anton
That's the spot I
Harrison.
like him at as well.
Yeah, I think Anton Harrison is somebody we don't talk enough about. What could they do at offensive line in terms of like tackle if they decide to wait? That's really difficult to say. I've been trying to pin down guys they could be interested in as at offensive tackle. Awanya Morris might make sense as a really good developmental, tackle in terms of his athleticism and his length and size. There's a lot of things he still needs to work on, but I could see that. Something I was trying to see, I wanted to see if the Steelers were interested in Nick Saldiveri. And going back to the Senior Bowl, I actually looked up Saldiveri and the Steelers connection. And apparently, according to Alex Zora of Steelers Depot, they talked. He interviewed Saldiveri, and they said they were going to have a formal meeting at the Senior Bowl. And I did see some, I did see some pictures of Tomlin eyeing Saldiveri kind of close, and he has that position versatility to play all over the line. He's more of a right tackle. He actually reminds me a lot of Andrew Wiley. That's a guy I would keep my eye on if they decide to wait a little bit later, in terms of like that pick 80, because we see where that Senior Bowl connection really start to come into play a little later in the draft, as opposed to it coming earlier.
Yeah. And I just think with Adam's question, like, what do you think we need more? Man, the tackle depth in this class, I do think it's a little bit of a weaker tackle class than like everyone else thinks. Even at the top, I think it's a little bit overrated. But I think that there's less depth, like significantly less depth at tackle than there is at defensive back or cornerback especially. So that would be why, to me, when you talk about what do you need more, I think if you got to let the board play out. And yeah, you're going to take best player available at a position of need. Both of those, to me, are the top two positions of need probably on this team right now. So I'm not going to be freaking out either way, one way or another. But I don't think that you're going to get a starting, like a year one starting caliber player if you don't get one with this first pick. Because I do anticipate, like Nick said, I like Anton Harrison as well. But I don't think that he's going to be available at 32. And any of these other guys that are on day two, there's some guys that I like as far as developmental pieces, but nobody that I think is going to come in here and start year one necessarily, for sure, that is. And then with defensive back, like as much as I like Deonte Banks, as much as I would be on board with the Christian Gonzalez, should he fall, even Joey Porter Jr., if they were to take him at 17, I can completely understand that rationale as well. But, there's so many good cornerbacks that are probably going to be there on day two. Like you think about, what if Emmanuel Forbes is there at 32? He's getting first round buzz now, so who knows? But, there's day two cornerbacks like Julius Brents, like Tyreek Stevenson, some other guys that Nick and I have talked about on the draft pod. Corey Trice from Purdue, DJ Turner has played a lot on the outside for Michigan. His frame is going to kick him inside to the slot, but he is a supreme athlete.
Yes.
Unbelievably quick, straight line speed. I really liked his tape a lot. He was a top 50 player for me. So it could go either way. I just think when we're talking about depth, the depth at corner is so much better in this class. I legitimately think that this draft falls off a cliff after round 5. Like I think the 6th and 7th rounds it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be like last year where you're going to find like a bunch of guys that are going to go. I'm sure there will be guys that I like in that range, but it's just not going to be like last year was. But I would definitely be more willing to bet on the Steelers getting a starter year one or a really big role player year one at cornerback at that point in the draft. Just trying to catch up on some of these comments. Steelers Network, what's up, brother? How we doing? What does Paris Johnson need to improve on? Would he be a left tackle or right tackle and move Chooks to left tackle? I'll kind of let you go first. I have thoughts on Paris Johnson as well, but I know we've talked about him a lot.
I think he would most likely be left tackle because it's where he's more comfortable at. He's
also played guard though. He's played guard.
Right.
He was a damn good guard.
Yes.
I will point that out. And when I was watching him over the summer before this year, I knew that he was a left tackle in high school, but dude, he was a baller at guard too. But go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. Paris Johnson, for me, I think he's a bit of a two-hand puncher, which actually leaves him a little bit open in his chest in terms of getting, a lot of guys like to bull rush him. You saw Lucas Van Ness be able to push him back on contact. I think one of the biggest concerns with Paris Johnson is something that's a little bit untalked about is his anchor. I do think he struggles to anchor down on that initial contact when guys push him back and he gets pushed a little bit too far back into the quarterback. It's definitely something he can improve on because he's a long guy. He's still not using his hands as optimally as he should, which I think could minimize a lot of that. But also, he's still growing. He's very much not reached his prime in terms of his body weight. He's a guy who's more lean for his height, and he definitely has more room to add. So overall, Paris Johnson, I think he's more of a left tackle, but in terms of things he needs to work on, anchor and just better independent hand usage.
Yeah, completely agree. He can be a little bit of a waist bender too. We talk about being, a two-hand puncher. Definitely agree there. He can sometimes get lean in one way. I think about that rep that he had where he gave up that sack against Georgia against that freshman who's really good, that edge rusher. Kind of same thing happened there. Got caught leaning a little bit, gave up an inside spin move for a sack.
That guy's
I thought
crazy, by the way.
He's really good. As the season went on, I thought that Paris Johnson, when he started playing like better competition, some of those flaws kind of started to, come up a little bit. So that's definitely notable. But like you said, like he's still really early in his developmental track. I mean, this dude is going to have the potential to be a really good player. I think that Paris Johnson can be a top 10, maybe even top 5 left tackle in the league one day. But it's really going to come down to how quickly he can get a little bit stronger and if his transition to his anchor kind of becomes a little bit quicker as well. And if he's improves on that hand usage and doesn't get so wide, guys aren't going to be able to get into his chest as much and won't have that upper hand on him there either. But when you look at a guy like Johnson that has that type of athleticism, the type of foot speed, the movement ability, this dude is freaking awesome on the backside of like zone runs, like backside cutoffs, reach blocks. He is one of the best that I can really remember coming out, honestly. And that goes back to how impressed I was with him over the summer when he was playing guard. Dude was constantly reaching nose tackles from the guard position on zone runs and just getting there with ease. And that's how I was like, this dude is a special type of mover. So yeah, I like Paris Johnson. If he's there at 17, great. He's not going to be a trade up. I think, I would not. Me and Nick are both on the same page here. We would both prefer that they stayed at 17 than traded up for anyone. The exception to that for me would be Jalen Carter, and we know that that's probably not going to happen. So I do want to get to this shout out. 6th or 7th round, we should draft Carrington Valentine from Kentucky. Dude has potential. Yes,
that would be awesome. I would be very on board with that.
Me and Nick have talked about Carrington Valentine just in terms of as a potential name to double dip. We already talked a little bit about on this pod or this stream about Corey Trice from Purdue. That was one of the very last people I was able to get to before I did my top 100. Like when I saw a baller. But yeah, Carrington Valentine, a lot of tools, man. A lot of tools, long, can really run, physical. And he's a hometown guy for me from Kentucky. So I want Darnell Washington. Yeah. The talk around Darnell Washington is funny to me. I don't think that Washington's in play, obviously, for the Steelers at 17, but, he did have a top 30 visit later in the process. What would you think? Yeah. What would you think if the Steelers say they took Darnell Washington at 32? What's your initial reaction?
So for me, I actually think the fit would make a lot of sense because Darnell Washington would allow Pat Freiermuth to play less in line, and Washington is a much better run blocker in line. The thing that I have a little bit of a hang up on with Darnell Washington, I've heard this from a few people. Like I listened to the Underdog Fantasies, their Buzz stream on what they've heard, And there's been some reports about Darnell Washington. His medicals might not be as clean as people think. I saw that also from, take this source with a grain of salt, but from Walter Football's Charlie Campbell, who does have his hits from time to time, but he definitely has more misses than he does hits in that regard. That late visit could honestly be about that, but also the Steelers, they see how deep this tight end class is, and getting a guy that can block in line, like a Luke Schoonmaker or a Darnell Washington, would make a ton of sense. I really like Luke Schoonmaker. I think he's a guy, he goes to Miami, I think he could be like their version of George Kittle in a way.
Yeah, Schoonmaker was a top. I think he was 75th on my big board. Like I really like Schoonmaker.
Yeah.
Really, I had no clue about him really individually as a player
54
until I
for
got
me.
to watch him at the Shrine Bowl, and he balled at the Shrine Bowl. Like absolutely balled, was killing people in one-on-ones. As far as Darnell Washington, man, like I think that his receiving ability and potential upside is getting oversold a little bit just because of
Agreed.
how freakishly built he is. Like he's just like an alien. But I don't ever really particularly think that Washington's going to be a number 2, number 3 type of receiving option in a good offense. Like I think he's probably more of like a number 4 auxiliary type of player. With that being said, you're not going to give a shit about that when your running back's going for like 1,500 yards every season, because you're just literally going to be able to just consistently displace people with him in line. I watched this dude literally do pretty much everything for that Georgia offense, a ton of dirty work, double teams, climbing to the second level, vertical displacement, horizontal displacement, just moving guys completely gaps over in the trenches. And he's awesome. And the thing is, he's not even really that technically refined in terms of a blocker. He's really just a mauler who's just so much bigger, so much stronger, so much longer than everybody. And it makes me think, like, if this dude actually becomes like a real technician, we're talking about, Mercedes Lewis,
Yeah.
Martellus Bennett type of player, which is really valuable. Like
Yes.
those are good players right there.
What's really funny about
Appreciate
watching
it, Mitch.
Darnell Washington was against LSU. He was like absolutely destroying true freshman Harold Perkins, who looks like a potential top 10 pick in the future, and just like he was displacing them out of his gap. Like
Perkins is a dog.
Absolute.
Y'all write that name down. All 100 and something of y'all that are in here, write the name Harold Perkins down. Y'all are gonna want to know about him.
Yep. And thing with Darnell Washington, you said it, his technique isn't that refined. He tends to lunge a good bit, and
that's where the upside comes in. I think that people are saying the upside is as a receiver. I personally think there's more upside, even more upside as a blocker. Like
I agree.
If his hand usage gets better, like this dude could be at like one of the, like probably the best tight end blocker in the league. Like, and I do think that that's valuable. And I do agree with your analysis in terms of, potentially putting a guy like Pat Freiermuth more in the slot, like as that move type of piece, instead of playing him as much inline, because that's really not where you're going to get the most out of him, at least as a blocker. This is a really good question. This is something we talked about a little bit in last night's live stream, but I wanted to get your take on this as well. If a run on cornerbacks and tackles happens early, what best player available would you want at the Steelers to pick? So I'm going to assume with your question, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to assume you're talking about, let's just say a fun theory that Porter Jr., Gonzalez, Witherspoon, the consensus top 3 cornerbacks are gone. And then
Banks too.
Yeah, and then we'll just say Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson Jr. are all gone as well. Say that those 6, if you want to include Banks in there too, that let's just say like those 7 guys are off the board. Where do you think the Steelers would pivot, and where would you want them to pivot?
I would either pivot to the next best tackle and like Anton Harrison, or I would go with the best defensive back left in Brian Branch from Alabama, who is an absolute dog and can play both slot corner and safety, even some outside corner a little bit too. He's a really good coverage guy overall. There's so many good instincts with him. Like if things just don't go right, you want to stick to your board in that case and, go to that position of need, but also not, freak out. Like that's the type of pick that Brian Branch would be. There would just be a very secure blanket in terms of, all right, we're not taking the risk here. We're going to play it smart.
Yeah, I want to throw another name out there, and then this is one that's gotten a little bit of smoke because Jeremy Fowler's made some interesting
Oh, I
comments
like this one
recently.
too.
But he said that in reference to Nolan Smith from Georgia,
Yes.
he said that specifically, there's no way he's getting past pick 17. Nolan Smith to me is a very, very interesting player. He's a top 10 player on my board. I'm bullish on his ability.
Same.
Unbelievable first step, lateral agility. I think he's an underrated pass rusher just because of how, he doesn't have a toolbox of moves necessarily, but just the ability to consistently win the outside shoulder. Smith is going to do that at the next level. I am not concerned about the size. What do you got?
I was going to say, so the Nolan Smith buzz, they could be looking at him as their version of Micah Parsons and how Dallas deploys him in terms of being able to play him as an off-ball linebacker. Because Nolan Smith, I've seen him cover guys like in space pretty dang well because
Dude,
he just has
flies.
It flies. He's got 4.38 speed
Yeah.
and he's got the hips of a corner.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then the bend, he can bend through contact so consistently. So I definitely see that vision. I just don't think he gets past Philadelphia.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, let's talk about potentially what you could do with him on defense. You could get so creative and it makes sense on a lot of different levels. At year one, you could play him a little bit off-ball linebacker, because they don't really have a long-term solution there. But you've got Alex Highsmith on the last year of his deal. Who knows how that situation is going to play out? Do they want to pay 2 edge rushers big money? Who knows? But then you could, on passing downs, passing situations, you could put Nolan Smith as that third outside linebacker. You can rotate other guys in off ball and sub package football. You can get so creative with this dude. And I'm not concerned at all really about the size, man. Like, I know he's a historical outlier in terms of his weight, but dude, you talk about block shedding, like
Yes, sir.
Mozzie Smith, Keanu Benton are some of the better like block shedders in this class. Nolan Smith is up there, man. Like, you would not expect it. But like, I remember 2 years ago, the very first time I watched him, I was like, this dude's listed at what? Like, he's listed at 230. Like, you see him get this full arm extension into these tackles that have 100 pounds on him. And he's
not that long either.
He's not. He's so this is something I noted in his profile. He's so compactly built, and he's just like, he said this at his combine podium, and he was the best interview I heard in Indianapolis. By the way, he was awesome to talk to. But he said, like, I remember, like, I was talking to him about his ability as a run defender, and I literally asked Nolan Smith. I said, "What do you make of like people talking about your size and like if you're going to be able to hold up on the edge? But like when I watch you, you're one of the better run defenders in the class." And he said, he goes, "I'm just cut strong, man. Like I take a lot of pride in being a good run defender, and this dude is a good run defender." So I'm telling you right now that would be, there's not a lot of picks in this class, honestly, that I'm like, okay, if the Steelers get him, I'm going to just run through my basement, like cartwheeling and backflipping. Nolan Smith would be a guy that if they got at 17, like, I'm going to be very happy. I don't know how the reaction would be on social media, but I would be very happy.
I think it would be mixed, but I think we could talk the general.
Yeah, look, yeah, give me the podium. I could talk y'all into it. I like Darnell Wright. Big question is, who's the starting left tackle, right tackle? Darnell Wright, to me, because his breakout came at right tackle and his film at left tackle wasn't nearly as good, I think you want to keep him on the right side. But there's nothing wrong with, potentially going into training camp and just saying, hey, look, Dan Moore, Chuks Okorafor, Darnell Wright, best 2 guys win. We'll figure out. We want the best. Like, something that I think an approach that they could particularly take is like, we just want to get the best 5 on the field. Like, whoever the best 5 is, we'll mix and match the pieces. I think that they've done that in Philadelphia at times, regardless of where you're drafted, what position you played in college, like best 5 on the field. And I don't think that's a bad thing. My guy Steelers way, you putting that monster down like I'm renewing my relationship with Jim Beam. Man, look, dude, there was like 3 days this week where I got like 2 to 3 hours of sleep. So I'm really excited and I'm jacked up, man. So Richard, any chance they take Avila from TCU with pick 32? Dude, Steve Avila he's one of my guys, man. I'm glad that he's starting to get more buzz. I don't know that. I think round 1 is maybe a little bit rich, but I really like him, dude. He's a stud in pass protection, and I felt like some of the better games that I watched on film with him, were against like some of his best competition. He was really freaking good against Michigan, man. Like he was
Yes.
really good against Mozzie Smith in Michigan. I actually thought that he had a couple really good reps against Georgia. You know, he was matched up on Jalen Carter a couple times, but Georgia's always one. We talked about this when we did our interior offensive lineman rankings. Georgia's one that I would like to watch for offensive linemen because they do so many stunts and like they slant guys and they stunts. And of course, they have a ton of talent, you know, incredible athletes too. But it's always a good gauge for me just to gauge an offensive lineman's eyes, like how well they communicate with their teammates. Can they recover? All that stuff. And Avila checked a lot of boxes for me. So if he's the pick at 32, hey, sign me up. I don't know how you feel about that.
I have Avila going 30 to the Eagles in my mock draft. I think he fits them really well. The guard center versatility of Steve Avila is probably some of the best.
Awesome.
Yeah, like
he's played 4 positions. I think the only one that he hasn't played is left tackle.
Yes.
Am I right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And the thing about Avila, like I thought his center film was almost better than his guard film because I think he is a very athletic reach blocker that doesn't get talked about enough. Like he's got this really good lateral mobility, really fires out of his stance. Like I think he's a guy who could be a better center than he is a guard.
Yeah, no, completely agree, man. Like wherever you wanted to play, I think the dude's a stud. Avila's definitely somebody that, you know, the Steelers have been linked to as well. So who knows what happens? Could the Steelers get Joey Porter Jr.?
Definitely.
Hey, definitely. I think that's the range. You know, he could go a little bit earlier. You know, I've talked about New England potentially. I know that they haven't historically taken cornerbacks this high, but you know, a team like New England who has all them small corners, you know, the Jack Jones, the Marcus Jones, Jonathan
They love
Jones.
playing press man.
Yeah, if they want to play, you know, a little bit more press man, but they want to go get a different arch type to match up with some different type of receivers, Porter Jr.'s link could come into play there. Washington's been linked to him really heavy, so that could be another barrier. But, you know, Joey Porter Jr. is probably going to come off the board somewhere in between like 14 and 24, I think. I think that's kind of the range-ish, it seems like. So, yeah, absolutely. That's a potential thing. Taylor, do you think Brian Branch is better than Deontay Banks at 17? Man, I think Nick and we're all in on either. So I don't think we have much of a preference. I think that I'd have to go look at. Let me see if I can pull up my big board real quick because I think I still have it pulled up.
I have Banks higher than Branch by 1 spot, but there is a tier difference.
So that's hilarious. So I have Branch at 12, Banks at 13. So that means you have him at what, 10 and 11. So
yes,
yeah. Nick and I are spending way too much time together these days. Yeah, no, that's funny. Yeah, either one, man. Like Brian Branch, because we've already talked a little bit about Deontay Banks. Brian Branch, I think he's a supercharged Mike Hilton. Like this dude plays the run extremely well. He's the best tackler in the class. The dude literally does not miss tackles. He takes on blocks, highly instinctive player, good processor. Play speed is completely good in my book. I have no qualms.
Yes, sir.
You know, maybe the long speed is, you know, a concern that maybe potentially a little bit more valid, but I love Brian Branch. If Pittsburgh was able to land him, I enjoyed talking with him at the combine. You know, he looks up to Minka. They have a good relationship. Getting him in the slot, man, I think he can play some box. I think he could play free safety. The Steelers wouldn't need him to do that because they have Minka, but all on board with Brian Branch or Deontay Banks. Let me see. Branch clearly loves the Steelers. Any chance he's there at 32? Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
We'll talk about this as well, but I think if you look at, I think Jacksonville 24. Jacksonville has got to stop the slide, right? Like that to me is where I've mocked him. I just think that Jacksonville really needs a slot player, and I think Branch can come in and do that day one. And I just think the value is really good there. I don't know how you feel. I know we've talked a little bit about Jacksonville as a potential landing spot.
Almost everyone has Brian Branch mocked to Jacksonville, and it makes me think more and more he's not going to be the pick there. I think 25 to the Giants is a potential like underrated spot he could go because Joe Schoen, he likes to stick a lot to the board. We saw it last year in the first round. Guy like Branch would make a lot of sense there. I'm a little interested on the Giants because they could go like with a center there potentially, maybe a wide receiver if Addison falls to them. But Branch, I think, could go anywhere in the 20s to 30s. but it's very possible he could fall out because I do think there's a lot of needs that teams are looking at, and they might not be looking at the slot and safety as strongly as like a offensive guard or offensive tackle.
Yeah. Yeah, Branch at 32, man, that's incredible value. Like we just mentioned, he's a top 12 player on both of our big boards. So definitely in on that. No, before 1-2, thank you. I appreciate that, man. Really excited. So let's talk about if y'all had to bet the house on the Steelers drafting someone any round, who would you say?
I'm not a betting man, but Deontay Banks right now is probably my favorite at 17 at this point.
Man, you get me excited, man. I'm not I'm like pessimistic about that option, but I'm gonna be really excited if that happens. So
yeah,
that's awesome. Man, I've mentioned this like 500 times, and I know Nick, you really like this guy as well. But Keanu Benton just looks like a Steeler to me. There are always like 4 or 5 guys throughout the draft cycle where I'm just like, this dude just looks like a Steeler. He plays like a Steeler. He checks so many boxes. Keanu Benton just checks so many boxes, man. So if I had to absolutely bet all of my money on somebody, Keanu Benton, if he's still there at 49, that's around the range that I have him rated as well. If he's there at 49, I think the Steelers, if they were able to get a tackle round 1, a corner at 32, something like that, and then could come around and get Benton at 49. That's quite the haul.
I think it's going to be between him and Brzee in that second round. If they do take a defensive lineman.
I had Brzee going to the Saints, I think at like 28. I was really just thinking to myself,
he falls out.
Yeah, I think that there's a good chance he falls out though. I don't know. I think that the freshman version of Brian Brzee is still in there somewhere. So, I'm optimistic about how that would play out. What pick scenario tonight would make you guys nauseous?
Tyreek Stevenson at 17. I can't see it, but for some reason,
don't put that in the air.
They keep mocking this one, and it keeps making me extremely nervous because they do like Tyreek Stevenson. I actually like Tyreek Stevenson, but I like him in the second round. Tyreek Stevenson, to me, I think he's a very good press man corner. I do think he's a little limited in his hip fluidity, but he makes up for it with good technical prowess, and he's inside-outside versatility. The pick that would make me nauseous, Keon White. If he went
same.
That Keon White I have as an edge rusher. I don't have as an interior defensive lineman. I think he struggles immensely with his size on the interior. Like, he looks smaller than he actually is built. Like, I think Lucas Van Ness looks bigger than him, and Van Ness is like 10 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Keon White, to me, that's the pick where if it happens, I'm not getting on Twitter during the whole night. You're probably not going to be happy with my draft reaction.
Yeah, so Keon White would be one. Stevenson would probably be another. Man, y'all are going to kill me for this, and I'm such a hater, so I'm just going to go ahead and get it out there. Lucas Van Ness, if they picked him at 17 to play edge rusher,
yes,
I would not be happy. I could get – this would be one that I would gradually over the course of next week, I would talk myself into and like calm myself down to not freak out. But if you guys have followed me on Twitter or listened to the draft pod, this has came up a gazillion times. I'm not that big of a fan of his game. I have him ranked in the 40s on my big board. I don't personally see it. The good news is he's an incredible athlete. So those types of guys are ones that you want to bet on at that position, especially. So maybe he proves me wrong. I don't, it's just, that would be one that I'm not a huge fan of. Why wouldn't you trade up for Paris Johnson? I think it's just, we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but I think the tackles are getting overrated just a little bit. And I think if you're going to, give up one of those second round picks, I just think with the Steelers' needs right now, it's just not something that I would be incredibly excited about doing, but I would like to get Johnson nonetheless. It's not like a doomsday scenario per se, but Johnson does have, we just talked about some of his weaknesses as a player. I think the upside's, immense, and, it's definitely exciting to potentially get your franchise left tackle, especially when you got a young quarterback who you're hoping is going to be the guy for the foreseeable future in Kenny Pickett. It's a nice scenario. I think that trading up for a guy is always really risky, and there's just very few guys in every draft, but especially this draft, where content doing that. I think it's a big risk, and he's not one of the people that I would be willing to do that for. This is a good question, something we talked about a little bit last night as well. But what happened with DeJuan Jones and the Steelers? I seen him in the Georgia game in the Senior Bowl, just bullying people. From my eyes, he looks like a man amongst children. There's some stuff around DeJuan Jones with the Senior Bowl and his pre-draft process. The weight concerns are very much legit. He didn't work out at his pro day. It's been reported that kind of rubbed the Steelers and some other teams the wrong way as well. He's a guy that I think could still go in round one. I mean, does he go 17? That seems a little bit less likely than it did a month ago. But I just think that, there's some concerns with him as well. I also think that there's concerns with his play style. There's not a lot of guys that are playing at 375 in the league and have been successful at it. I mean, you think about some of the bigger tackles, Trent Brown comes to mind, guys like that have been solid players. But Jones, there are specific matchups that are going to give him trouble. Like guys that know how to set up rushes, set up their inside counters, they're going to get in trouble because he doesn't have that recovery ability, in my opinion, to hang with some of those guys. He's a very specific type of pass protector. So, Connor, appreciate you. Best channel. If the Steelers trade up into the top 10, who would be your top pick you would want them to draft? Jalen Carter.
Yeah, Jalen Carter, Peter Skoronski. I know they're not going to take Skoronski because they view him as a guard, but for me, Skoronski, I just think he could be an all-pro guard, and I do think they're looking at Kevin Dodson every day and wondering if they want to keep him here. And
yeah, especially when you got someone on this channel who's predicted Kevin Dodson won't be a Steeler by the end of the weekend. Did they take a center at any point? And if so, who? There's been a lot of stuff about interior offensive linemen, not just centers, but, guards as well. I think that the Steelers, this is just my take on it, I think they're ready to get off the Kevin Dodson roller coaster. And I think that they really want to make sure that they have good depth. Tomlin has mentioned that, the Steelers aren't going to get lucky like they did last season and have all 5 starters for all 17 games. It's
Agreed.
just, it's not going to happen. It's very statistically improbable as it is. So I do think that there's a chance they could take a center. One of my favorite options is Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas. I will keep pounding that table.
Fourth round, baby.
Fourth round. This is like where I would want them to go. I definitely think that that's a potential name. Did you want to throw anybody else in there?
I think if they went center early, John Michael Schmitz is probably going to be their guy. They've shown a lot of interest in him throughout the draft process. He's a very safe player.
Yep, safe.
And I think he could just be a really good starter for them. The wrestling background really helps his hand usage. He's really nasty in the run game. I love watching him versus Keanu Benton down at the Senior Bowl because they just kind of just went back and forth in that regard. And even during the season, they both got each other back, and I think it's definitely possible. The Steelers do the Dulac Gonzalez. I can't see it because I think as much as I like Christian Gonzalez, I think there are too many good corners in this class, and I think it would be almost redundant to trade up for even the best corner in this class because I do think the teardrop between Gonzalez and even number 5 is not as large as it is for tackle going from 1 to 5.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying there's just, I don't know, the draft, the smoke and stuff. It just seems like the Steelers are very transparent about their process and letting us know the directions that they're going just based on where they are at for the pro day cycle, the combine visits, all that stuff. But in terms of the local media getting insight, like draft day, those predictions have not been, and this isn't a shot at Dulac. I'm not trying to, be that guy, but just in terms of those predictions in years past, it has not gone that well for, a lot of those guys that are trying to make those predictions. And hey, we're doing the same thing, trying to piece the puzzle together. It's just, just a little bit confused about, if they would actually do that. But again, I like Christian Gonzalez. He is the number 5 or 6 player on my big board. So Blizzard Gaming, do we need more firepower offense? Who do you think we go get? I think this draft is going to be defensive heavy, but this is a good question though. Nick, give me the one guy that you want on offense to add to this group. It doesn't necessarily have to be a weapon, but who's the guy that you're banging the table for the most?
So probably I would honestly have to go with Ricky Stromberg later on, just because I think Mason Cole is a serviceable center. And I do think Ricky Stromberg is a much better athlete who can offer way more as a puller. But I do think Stromberg is a little bit, I don't want to say raw, but he has these issues with his technique in terms of he's a bad head dropper and lunger. It almost to a degree that like at the Shrine game, it was so bad because I saw him getting beat by multiple guys, like even Dante Stills,
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Turner. There were a lot of guys who were taking advantage of him, just dropping his head. But he is a very nasty guy in space. He has good hand usage. He just has to keep his head up a little bit better. I think that type of guy just makes so much sense for Pittsburgh. If I was talking a straight offensive weapon, though, Luke Schoonmaker. I think that's the tight end I would be banging the table for because he's my favorite in terms of being a blocker, and I think he offers quite a bit of receiving upside as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see what could happen depending on the board and who's there, right? Like,
Give me a new coordinator.
yeah, yeah, facts. No, so I think the weaponry that the Steelers have, man, like, is a really good weaponry for a
I
young
agree.
quarterback. And I'm not saying they're like a top 5 group in that regard, but I just think when you look at it, when your top 4 receiving options are Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and Allen Robinson.
And you got Calvin Austin behind.
Yeah,
too.
and Calvin Austin as like a potential wild card. Like, I'm completely fine with that. I think Najee Harris is a solid running back too. They continue to upgrade this offensive line, and I think that you've got what you need on offense to succeed, pending the quarterback development, pending the offensive coordinator, taking a step forward. But I think in terms of weapons, I would be kind of surprised if they took one early. I know some comments in here saying Jordan Addison. That seems a lot less likely than it did, around the draft. If Addison went to 32, would they think about it? I think the top 2 picks in this draft are going to be in some order, tackle or corner. I don't think they leave day 2 without a cornerback. Could they take a defensive lineman? We already mentioned Brzee. I just don't think that there's that receiver that's going to be there. Josh Downs maybe at 49. I mean. But even then, like, I feel like he's a little bit repetitive with Austin just from a size build, even though they're definitely different players. So I don't know. I agree with you. Stromberg, Schoonmaker, both guys that I really like. A tackle upgrade would be nice as well. Do you see us trading a 4th rounder for Chase Young? Brother, he is not going for no 4th rounder. But yeah, Chase Young. I think that people are kind of losing sight a little bit at the fact that, Young was coming back from a significant injury. Like, as a rookie, he was really productive. There's a lot of traits there. I think he's going to bounce back this year. If he's fully healthy, he'll bounce back and he's going to get paid in free agency. Look at who it is.
Yo.
What up? Jumping right in here.
I didn't realize I was coming right on. I just hit enter and here I was. I was just
the man, the myth. What's going on, brother? How we doing?
We're good. Yeah, we just got here. As you can see, things are looking real nice. There's a couple more cameras here. I already been asked what the trade rumors are. I said everything. Everything's a trade rumor at this point. That's all we're hearing. I'm sure you guys had it all covered. But how are you guys? How's everything rolling?
We're chilling, man. Everybody's having a good time. We're chopping it up, answering a bunch of questions. Non-Steelers news, but Mike Florio just reported that the Cardinals are working on a deal to send D-Hop and pick 3 to the Titans.
Pick 3. I just saw it. Was just talking to Donnie about it.
Oh my goodness, that would be huge.
The Titans are getting a quarterback.
I would love that for Tennessee because Stroud with DeAndre Hopkins. Oh my goodness, sign me the heck up for that. And I'm not huge on Traylon Burks, but he showed quite a bit as a rookie. And then Chigo Okonkwo, who I think could be a stud tight end. That would be great for the Titans, especially because they're in such a weird spot overall.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You got to imagine what they're giving up, though. Like, what are you giving up to get pick 3 and DeAndre?
Yeah, it's going to be a haul because coming from 11 to 3, that's crazy. And that shakes. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream. That shakes the entire board up because, Arizona moving back to 11. We already talked about, Kyler potentially pushing for a guy like Paris Johnson. What does that mean? If the Steelers, want to go up, and are they going to have to get to 8? Are they going to have to get in front of Arizona maybe for Paris Johnson? That's really interesting because I think 11, Paris Johnson Jr. to me is I think he's like, what is he on my big board? I think he's 7. So I think in the after the top 5, like I would really be comfortable like taking him there. But man, that's crazy. That's awesome.
What's awesome? In my final mock draft, I predicted his trade between the Titans and Cardinals for number 3 overall, and I had them taking CJ Stroud. So if I
look at this man is on fire.
No,
that's wild.
I called it a few days ago, and I even had a few people go in my DMs, and they were like, "Nah, this dude, I don't see the report that that they could do this." And there are people plugged in. They're trying to tell me this, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I saw the connection between Stroud and Mike Vrabel, so this would be an awesome hit for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's pretty wild.
So Noah, what are we hearing at the facility? What's the
nothing? Everything's
what's
pretty
the latest?
Calm. Everything's calm right now. Like it seems that you're just waiting for something. But I think the biggest thing is that we know who the Pittsburgh Steelers are, so they're going to let all this craziness happen. And if like a move does happen, which I don't think you can't anticipate, it's definitely a possibility. If a move does happen, they're going to let everything lay out first. Like they're just going to sit back and just let all the chaos and the madness happen, and then they're just going to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to squeeze in here and get Paris Johnson at 9 or 10 now.
No, the thing with the Cardinals moving down, that actually puts them in position for a better trade up for Paris Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
I could see anywhere from number 8 at Atlanta, who might want to trade down and take Bijan Robinson. That's one I'd keep an eye on.
That's what I had in my mock, was trading down to like 11 or 12 and taking Bijan.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
Arizona, Bijan?
No. Atlanta.
Oh, I was like, are you kidding me?
That is selfishly, I know the positional value aside, but like that's one of my favorite fits. Like if Atlanta were to get Bijan, like I know that Zeke, when he was a rookie and early in his career, he ran wild because of that Cowboys offensive line, and Zeke was really freaking good coming out of college. That's the type of numbers that Bijan's going to put up, and he's a freakish receiver. And I just imagine all the possibilities that Atlanta could use. Like they have a tight end who's basically a receiver. They could have Bijan, who also can play in the slot. He's a damn good receiver as well. I just think that Arthur Smith could get pretty freaky on offense. I do want to answer this question. Nobi is talking about Deion Henley or Trenton Simpson. DC is taking Jack Campbell.
Henley.
This is something that we haven't talked about really inside linebacker wise. If the Steelers take an inside linebacker like at 49, 80, like what's the favorite name there for you guys?
Dorian Williams at 80. They showed a lot of interest in them at the Tulane, pro day. I believe it was their linebackers coach was there, Aaron Curry. Williams fits a lot of their athletic profile. It would make a lot of sense. I would be on board with it.
Yeah, I got to agree. I just think that it just makes for what the Steelers are trying to do at inside linebacker. Like Jack Campbell, I think is just like a true-blooded Pittsburgh Steelers smashing them out type of linebacker, but that's not what they need. They need a pass coverage linebacker, somebody that can develop, and then you let Mark Robinson develop into the smash mouth inside linebacker, on top of Cole Holcomb. So I agree with you, Nick. I think that's just, if you're just thinking fit and not just 3 guys like you had last year that are just good at run support, it's got to be Williams.
Yeah, I completely agree. Williams, he's the guy that I've mocked to them 80 in that 80 to 120 range. That's about where I see Williams coming off the board, and I really like him. Like his feeling zone coverage, the athleticism, he has some violence to his game as well, and I think that's a really good fit for what the Steelers are potentially missing in that room. My guy Zach in here. Did you guys hear what the bootleg guys said in their mock draft stream yesterday about the Steelers trading up? Yes,
I did.
I know Nick heard that. We talked about that a little bit. That's not the first time that they've mentioned something about the Steelers trading up. They've been hammering that idea home. And I think that's interesting. It's where. That's the thing. Where is it going to happen?
Yep.
It's funny.
Do you guys follow the notion of – my bad, Nick. Do you guys follow the notion of it's going to be a corner over an offensive tackle?
On the trade up,
Nick's
no.
Nick's face just says it all.
I would be surprised, man. I really would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Dulac's thing? Somebody
I'm
hit
talking
us in
about
the
Dulac's
chat with
report.
it.
And like I get it, like I get their interest in a star corner. If they see a guy and they're like, "This is Jalen Ramsey," we'd rather have Jalen Ramsey than take a risk anywhere else. I understand that, but I don't know. I just feel like the reports have said that they've loved every single corner to come out of this draft, every single one of them. So why would they move up to get one where offensive tackle they've only done their homework on like 5 guys? You know, why not? Well, why are your choices narrow there, and that's where you're going to go as corner?
Yeah, I mean, again, a trade up is not my preferred option just in this class with very few blue chip talents. And I like, I really like Christian Gonzalez, number 5 player on my big board, something like that. Like Paris Johnson Jr., number 7 guy. It's just, I think it's a risky play in a class like this without, the type of top tier talent that we've had in years past. But I'm not going to be complaining too awful much because I would love to see those guys as Steelers. I don't mind Brenton Strange from Penn State at tight end.
I would like that too.
Brenton Strange, they've spent a little bit of time with him. The tight ends coach for the Steelers was at the pro day. Of course, that's a hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we lost Derrick.
We lost Derrick for a second. It is a hop, skip, and a jump away from there. Let me ask this, Nick. Do you think that if they go a tight end, do you think that there's a point where they cancel out tight end? Is it an all or nothing type of thing, or do you think that they go after a guy that maybe has the same skill set as like a Zach Gentry, like a developmental piece?
I think they want a guy who can at least block in line because I think they understand Pat Freiermuth is a little bit inconsistent in that regard, blocking in line, and they can have him spread out more in the slot and outside as opposed to, doing something that he's not the best in terms of his skill set. Like Luke Schoonmaker, I'm a huge advocate of him. Brenton Strange would make a lot of sense because he's a good blocker as well. The Darnell Washington, obviously, that connection, if you wanted to go with a tight end high, and Tomlin, he was talking, when he came in on the press conference and he said in the background, tight ends. He's not wrong. This is such a good class. I really enjoy the tight end class, so I would be very happy with that.
So I think that Darnell Washington is definitely an option for them. Brenton Strange makes a lot of sense too. I just feel like if you're going to add a tight end, add a splash. You're not removing Pat Freiermuth from this offense. You're not giving him demotion. You're just helping him out. Like you're getting another tight end option, which, Omar said it himself at the NFL Combine that a tight end is a quarterback's best friend. We've always known this. You get a big 6'7" guy, there's your red zone threat. You already added Allen Robinson, fixes a lot of things. I think Strange does the same thing in some regards, but he's
back
developing at the same time. He's back.
Yeah, sorry. No, my connection bugging out. We got some construction going on in the Bell household, so excuse my Wi-Fi connection being a kind of a disaster. No, but I like Brenton Strange a lot. I think that him, Schoonmaker, adding a tight end in this class, man. I know that that's not a need that all the fan base is kind of talking a lot about, but this class is so freaking deep. Like, I just think that you can get really good role players in this class. And that's not the case year after year. Year after year, it seems like making a top 5 list for tight ends is oftentimes like really difficult. And there was guys that I struggled to leave off my top 100 because there was just so many guys. I'm like, I'd like to have this dude. I'd like to have this dude.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I just asked Nick, do you think that there's a cutoff? Do you think that there's like, this is still a developmental piece. We might as well just keep Zach Gentry as the number 2. Or do you think that it's, do you think that they're shooting for the stars here a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
We got local celebrities pulling in here.
I don't think that there's a cutoff, man. I think that when you look at the deal that Gentry signed, I mean, and this isn't any disrespect to Zach Gentry. I just, he has very little guaranteed money. It's a 1-year deal. This isn't a guy that necessarily is going to play into the Steelers draft plans. I think that they would be, content necessarily to roll with him as the number 2 tight end with Pat Freiermuth next season. But if they have a chance to upgrade that spot with the Luke Schoonmaker, a guy like Brenton Strange could be a potential upgrade as well. I don't think there's a, necessarily a cutoff point. I don't know how you feel about that, Nick.
another Penn State connection. Keep an eye out. The former Penn State tight end went to Old Dominion. Most
Zach
athletic.
Kuntz.
Most
Zach
athletic
Kuntz. Yeah.
testing tight end in the class. While that athleticism doesn't always translate on the film, I think his straight line speed's a little oversold. But I do think he's a very fluid athlete. There's a little bit more receiving upside with him overall. But I think in terms of inline blocking, there's some potential there that I don't think enough people are talking about. I would be interested in that pick if they decide to go that direction.
Yeah.
I'm about it.
No, we've kind of already bounced these scenarios back and forth, but Broderick Jones, Deontay Banks at 17. I'll let you kind of get your shot at this question because this has been a frequent one in the chat.
That's so tough, right? Like, because I think like the bigger need, you're going to fill a bigger hole by drafting Broderick Jones, but I think Broderick Jones isn't as good, for lack of a better way to describe this, as Deontay Banks. Like, I think Deontay Banks is a better player and can be a lot more exciting, but Broderick Jones has a lot of upside. I'm going Broderick Jones just because I think you could come back at 32 and get a corner if you need to and feel okay about the situation. Whereas if you did it the other way around, I don't feel as confident about it. I think Broderick Jones is cut off. The big thing is, what's after that? Like, is Darnell Wright over Deontay Banks or Joey Porter Jr.? Like, do you guys feel confident about that one?
You go ahead, Nick.
So for me, this tackle class, Broderick Jones for me is a very polarizing player because I think he has a huge trapdoor to his floor. Because I think there's a lot of things he needs to improve on when it comes to. I think his anchor is better than it gets credit for. I think the problem is his hand usage is so wide, and he just leaves his chest open consistently. He tends to duck his head a little bit too much as well. But you talk about the athleticism on the move and just his absolutely, like, his power was on display at the combine with, the Steelers, offensive coaches getting swung all the way around. Like, he's a really powerful guy, and I think it would make sense for them at 17, considering that Banks and like this corner class. The corner class is deep. Broderick Jones, I understand the upside swing in that and at that spot. I think that's probably the direction they'd go. I just don't think he gets past the Jets. I think the Jets love him.
Yeah. Broderick Jones, man, like you said, just the hand placement consistently wide, I talked about this last night on the stream, but, not tying his hands and feet together, forgetting one or the other part of pass protection on way too many reps. If you want to get a good look at kind of what that looks like, watch the Missouri game. Isaiah McGuire, who I'm quite high on in terms of against the consensus board, McGuire was running through his chest and just like, over and over and over because he just kept leaving it open. But when you talk about the upside for Jones, man, it's just all about the athleticism. And like, I just love watching this dude get out on the move, work in space. I mean, when they would pull him sometimes, and it was like I could feel from my laptop screen the fear of God in some of these defensive players' eyes when he was pulling around, because they're like, oh no, I'm about to get put in an absolute body bag. And that's basically what would happen, man. Like, he's awesome. Like, he has a great targeting system. He's athletic to get out in space on the perimeter. I definitely see the upside swing, but like Nick said, like, and that's why I'm against like trading up, even if it's for a couple spots for him. I understand it from the Steelers' perspective, but I just think like at that point you're reaching a little bit for need, and really, really betting on your coaching staff to be able to help him hit that ceiling and avoid that, trapdoor floor. Richard, what happens to Tannehill? Tannehill's deal, if I remember correctly, doesn't have very much guaranteed money left to it, or maybe it has like one more year of guaranteed money.
I think this is the last year they're guaranteed. I think it's like $32 million or something.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the Titans are at a point where I would probably either try to shop Tannehill if there was like a suitor out there that would be willing to take him, or maybe
guaranteed this year.
Huh?
$0. Yeah, zero guaranteed.
So then,
you cut him.
If I was moving up and making that significant of a jump with CJ Stroud, I would probably. Yeah, I would be letting go of Tannehill, in my opinion, and then going to get a veteran backup that I could start. Like, if Stroud just comes into training camp and you just think that this dude's not ready, which I don't know that would happen, but if he comes into training camp's not ready, go get a cheap backup, have him start the first month of the season. The Titans are not going to be a good football team next year. So let him kind of don't throw him to the wolves necessarily, but there's no reason to keep Tannehill and pay him that much money when you just gave up. I haven't seen the reported trade details, so if you guys get those, drop those in the chat. But
The
I'm
trade has not
assuming it's a
happened yet.
haul.
The trade
It's not
hasn't happened yet. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's got to be a haul. Like it's
It's
just
going to be
assumed.
a haul. Moving from 11 to 3 and getting Hopkins in the deal, if that happens that way, it's going to be a haul for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a
You're
name
giving
that
up
we
two
actually
first
haven't
rounds.
talked about a lot, and this was a guy that Nick kind of convinced me to put him in my top 5 on my big board. I had him at 6, ended up swapping him up a little bit, but Emmanuel Forbes, but 17 maybe too early, but 32 maybe too late. Yeah, he's generating some first round steam, man. Like it does seem like some of the more well connected big media types are starting to mock him more in the first round. I've seen as early as Washington at 16. We talked about Washington as a potential suitor for Joey Porter Jr. What do you guys think about Forbes? If he were to make it to 32, do you think that they would potentially go with him over a guy like maybe Tyreek Stevenson or Julius Brent?
It's kind of hard to say like what their preference is, but for me, Emmanuel Forbes at 32 would be a tremendous value. I think his floor is 28 to the Bengals. I think the Bengals absolutely love the type of player he is. I think the ball skills are absolutely insane. Like he has such a knack for being able to not only, be able to find the ball in the air and, bait quarterbacks into a false sense of security, but he is so good at being able to turn into a runner after the interception and just taking, plays back to the house. It's something that's rare with his game. And he has been starting to build up some weight too. Like he's gotten to 174. He believes he can get up to 180, which would be good for him. It would still be slightly an outlier for his size, but it would make you a lot more comfortable as opposed to 166, which is just an absolute toothpick. And when you combine his aggressive play style as a run stopper, a little concerning. I saw Emmanuel Forbes. Actually, I think it was Mel Kiper's recent mock draft. He had him going 17 to us, and I would not be opposed to that. I actually like Emmanuel Forbes quite a bit. I don't think he makes it to 32. I think it would be a very high upside type swing. I do think his floor is a little bit lower because he has a tendency to gamble, but I'd be good with it overall. I think he fits the athletic profile and the ball skills they like.
Yeah, at 32, he's definitely he's prime value. The 166 makes me nervous. To a degree, like I expect he'll be in an NFL facility. I know eating the lunches here that you could gain weight pretty easily. Like it's not even a question. So I think that he could put on like 10 pounds. What I think is interesting is I was watching the Pat McAfee show earlier, and Pac-Man Jones said that he played his entire career at 175. I think if he could stay at 175, I don't think you stay there all season though. Like that's what makes me nervous is by the end of the season, you're right back to like 166, 170. And that's little. But again, like, I don't know, like these things happen all the time where it's like, well, nobody ever did it until this guy did it. I don't know if Emmanuel Forbes is going to be that guy, but I wouldn't be upset about taking a chance on him just because I think he is the best ball hawk in this draft. And if all your other options are gone, I mean, it's not a bad move,
Yeah, and just in terms of Forbes, like we talk about historical outliers, right? Like he's almost 6'1" with over 32-inch arms. So he's tall, he's long.
That's the thing about Pac-Man is Pac-Man's like 5'10". So
yeah, but he's the 166-pound thing for cornerbacks is quite literally 0 percentile for the NFL mock draftable database. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I know Daniel Jeremiah brought up a really interesting comp for him the week of the combine, which made me think like, okay, there has been someone that's done it. It's Samari Rolle for the Titans and the Ravens. And that's actually a really good comparison. Granted, that was quite a while ago. There's just not a lot of guys that play on the boundary at that kind of size, man. But when I look at Forbes, like Nick said, the range of outcomes for him is a little bit vast. And I think that on a play-to-play basis, it's going to be vast because I see this dude as a gambler, but I see him with exceptional recovery speed. Like he has the best recovery speed of anyone in this class. Maybe Gonzalez could have him beat, but I just never saw anyone be able to stack Gonzalez because of how loose his hips were and how good he was at just staying in the hip pocket. Forbes, man, like he'll take some gambles and he'll let guys get by him, and then he's instantly caught up. The one thing I'll say about Forbes too, the NCAA record holder for pick sixes, so the type of ball skills and playmaking ability the Steelers really covet. With Forbes, though, I caution everybody to just kind of pump the brakes a little bit on like putting on weight. As someone who has lost a lot of weight recently and like gained weight rapidly, like at other points in my life, and I am not a high quality athlete, your body, like the way it functions just in terms of like athleticism is completely different. And even like 15 pounds, man, like I know it's easy for like us, like normal human beings to say like going from like 165 to 180 is fine. But like his top trait to me is the recovery speed and the playmaking ability. What's he going to run? Like how fast is he going to be at running at 166 pounds to running 180, 185. If his recovery speed isn't quite as good because he's a little bigger, that changes his athletic profile. So that does, I think, need to be a conversation. But the other thing I'll say about the Forbes and the last thing, the dude hits. Like there's no hesitation with his game. He doesn't play small. So some of that could be mitigated. There as well. I think that this is a really good. What's up, Joe? I think this is a really good question. Who is primed to make the biggest draft day blunder? The Texans? Question mark.
No, I think the Texans, based off like the Adam Schefter tweet about them potentially trading back into the first round, I almost worry that they're going to take Hendon Hooker later in the draft and completely wait on quarterback. And I just think if you know a Texans fan, be sure to send them your regards. Just don't let them. Make sure they're okay, man, because that's gonna be rough if they end up doing that.
Are you totally out on them drafting Will Anderson? Like, do you think that's the wrong move?
No, not necessarily. I just think they're playing a huge risk with wanting to take a quarterback with their second first round pick, because Will Anderson, I think he's a very good player. But I'm not sure if the Texans are going to be bad enough to be up here this time again next year. It's very possible. If they believe they can do it, then you know what? Go for it.
If they believe they can be bad enough to pick first or second.
It's really difficult because I believe in D'Amico Ryans as a coach, and I think he could be an excellent motivator, but I think they are going to have issues just being as bad as they were. And not just that, Lovie Smith, he screwed them out of that number 1 overall pick because they came back against the Colt. That was such a funny moment because the Texans they're just been a complete disaster as an organization, and there's the rumor about them being worried about CJ Stroud and Mulgeta being his agent, who was Deshaun Watson's agent. So there's that connection. I don't think it should have a play on the type of quarterback you draft, but the owners might be feeling some stress in that regard. So I definitely think they could screw it up.
Yeah, the last thing about the Texans, man. I'm trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and just try to understand it from their perspective, not just as it pertains to their vision for next year, but like in general, I am a big proponent of you don't take a position just to take one. Like especially quarterback. Quarterback's the most important position in all of sports. If you are not 100% sold that there is if Bryce Young was your only true franchise graded guy, don't take one. Not at 2, because you're not going to get value. And then, quarterbacks, they reset the timeline for everybody. D'Amico Ryans, this is his first year. We know he has a long leash. I don't know about Nick Caserio. That's the big question mark to me is Caserio now tied to Ryan's tenure, or is he on the hot seat to where, like, if he's making this pick, he's like, hey, I got to do something now or I don't have a job next year. So that dynamic is a little bit questionable to me, but you don't just take a quarterback because you want one. If they take a guy like Will Anderson, I understand it. If they take a guy like Tyree Wilson, I'm a little bit more skeptical because I don't.
If you take Tyree Wilson, that is Tyree Wilson
in that regard.
The medicals too.
But he's
that's the blunder.
Yeah, he's definitely interesting. Brad said, excited for the Patriots to draft a 4th rounder tonight. That was a fun question we ran into, I think, last night or sometime this week about who the random guy that's not being mocked in any first round that potentially gets picked tonight. And Cole Strange, he was like the first kind of guy that we've had like that in the last couple of years, right? Like who's the guy?
LJ
They did it before.
LJ
Collier,
was the worst
LJ
pick I've seen
Collier,
in the first round.
one.
Give me a name. Give me a name. Call your shot. If they're gonna if there's gonna be a guy that's not in any mock draft that you've seen that goes tonight, who is it?
Where do they pick? What's their pick?
No, I'm not saying for the Pats. I'm just saying for anybody. Give me one
that shouldn't be in the first round
isn't in anybody's mock draft but goes first round.
DJ Turner. I'm gonna say DJ Turner.
That's
possible. I don't know.
I like him.
I don't know where he's gonna go. I think he's going to go a lot higher than people. I would like Cincinnati. Like he could end up in Cincinnati, which just, you could say what you want. Not that high of a pick. Bad pick, in my opinion. Bad. There's just too many corners to take one in the 20s that isn't a first round pick until 48 hours ago. Just no.
I think I like Julius Brents, but there's a team that I could see taking him kind of high, and that might be the Giants, who seem to have an astronomical grade on the board for him. I think he's a little bit more raw than people give him credit for, but I've spoken to him at the Senior Bowl. He's a really outstanding guy, just really well driven. Like I think he's a very good prospect. I think taking him in the first round though is a mistake overall.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Jartavius Quan Martin from Illinois. I know that. I think that if we're talking, no one's mocking them in the first round and goes first round. I'm calling my shot on Quan Martin. That's who I want. I don't know. Maybe that's just because I really like the guy and I've talked about him a lot recently. So that's going to be my my answer. Facts. My great work all draft season. Appreciate you, man. We really appreciate that. Man, so no, I know you got to get out of here soon because you got to head to the facility to get ready. Before you jump off, man, I got to ask you two questions. One, I want your pick at 17. And then two, I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that I gave Zach last night. I'm going to give it to Nick before he jumps off. 3 guys, all right, that you would, if you had to bet the house on, one of these 3 guys is a Pittsburgh Steeler by the end of the weekend. Doesn't have to be first round, obviously. 3 guys that you just see as Steelers. Boom, go.
Okay, so we'll go. I'll answer the second one first. 3 guys that I would bet the house on. Oh, wow, this is a tough one. You got to put Joey Porter Jr. in there. I think that's like your easiest money. Probably has negative value, but I would say it's your best call here. 2, you mentioned this a while ago, and I could see it happening perfectly. Bennett, excuse me. Or Benton. Yeah, I said it right the first time. Somebody drove by as I said it. I think that he fits perfectly what the Steelers do. I think they loved him at the Senior Bowl. They followed him all the way through, right up until the pre-draft visit. I could definitely see that happening. Number 3, I'm trying to get like a little creative that I would bet the house on. At number 3, Jonathan Mingo seems like a good one, but I'm going to go crazier. I'm going to say Jaren Hall. I'm going to say BYU quarterback Jaren Hall.
I like it.
I don't think they pass up a quarterback in the 7th round. I think it's definitely
and everybody's going to complain about it, especially.
And everybody's going to lose their mind, but it makes perfect sense. Super athletic guy who could be a practice squad. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, whoever you need, and then maybe he develops in. Yeah. Maybe exactly. And that's what you're looking for in a 7th round quarterback is just somebody who's ready to come in and just be a sergeant or be a general or whatever and listen to everything and learn. And, on top of that, he's athletic. I think he's just the perfect fit. Those would be my 3 guys. I have a feeling I would lose all my money, but I would feel really good about that.
We got the Jaren Hall. We got the Jaren Hall expert on the show right now. I don't think there's anyone in America that knows more about Jaren Hall than my guy Nick Martin.
All right, so Nick, this is the question: is Jaren Hall better than what Chris Oladokun could have been?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Jaren Hall is probably my favorite 25-year-old quarterback in this class, if that says anything.
Shots fired at Hendon Hooker. Shots fired.
I really like Jaren Hall as a vertical passer. I think his Senior Bowl was really rough by many standards. I think it was something that was very surprising with him. Very good athlete. He could scramble. The biggest problem that's with him has been he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's just consistently been dealing with injuries year after year. He's a guy who's extremely well spoken. You know, he went on a mission trip. He's married. You know, he's just extremely well spoken. He's considered the leader of BYU. Guys really respect him. He's won over a lot of guys in interviews. Like it makes a lot of sense. I like Jaron Hall a lot as a person. I'm not sure what his upside is, but as a backup quarterback, you can't go wrong there. I would like to have him in the 7th round. He might go higher than that, though. We'll see.
Yeah. I wanted to get back to you. Got to get out.
No. I'll head out in a minute. I still got to get my first round pick.
Jake. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Jake mentioned Julius Brents as the guy who could go first round that nobody's putting in there. That's actually a good one. I just think,
Bucks? Ooh,
the Bucks have met with him multiple times. That's really interesting to me. The Bucks, they have kind of a thing for those like bigger corners, right? Like Carlton Davis is big, Jamel Dean's big, and neither one of those guys were like universally loved guys when they came out. So that's really interesting.
Wow, look at Mike Turner's guess here on the 3 guys here: Sidney Brown, Kentrell Clark, and Derrick Hall.
Yeah, my guy Kentrell Clark. You can tell Mike's been listening to the pod.
Yeah. I actually did have you had him moving up, and then I had him at 120.
Yeah, I had him trading Kevin Dotson to get Kentrell Clark. I went and called my shots on that. So, give us your first round pick though. Before you got to get out of here.
All right. So before I head out here, my first round pick. Okay. So I'm going to say this. I'm not going to take the moving up off the table. It's just not going to happen. Do I think it's going to be for a cornerback? No. But would it surprise me? Also, no. I think that, just they got their guys. Maybe it's 2 guys, maybe it's 3 guys, but they have their guys that they'd move up to. I think if they sit at 17 and they don't make a move, Joey Porter Jr. is just the easiest answer to go with. I don't think it's exciting at this point, but I think that he's got everything that you want to develop into a corner, minimal risk. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for a superstar. You're just looking for somebody to come in here and be your 7th round pick and learn from Patrick Peterson and fit the defense. And I think that's him. And I think when it's all said and done, it'll be another one where it's just like Najee Harris and Kenny Pickett and whoever, and be like, we all knew this. But it's a good pick. At the end of the day, it's a good pick.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the deal. Well, no, I appreciate you hopping on with us. I know you've been busy. I know all 3 of us have a very, very long night ahead of us. So
very long.
Here's to more empty Monster cans and a fun night of draft content.
I got a Prime in the car. I'm about to go grab it and then pack my coffees and we'll be good. But I appreciate you boys. Right, enjoy the rest of your show, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, sounds good, man. Peace.
Have a good one.
Wealthy's World. Finally get to catch you guys live. Love the show. Love the work. Porter Banks is 17, and we move up Paris Johnson. Appreciate you, brother. That means a lot. Herbig will end up as a Steeler. Nick, I don't know if you were in the stream last night, but I dropped an interesting Herbig theory. It's actually really similar to the Nolan Smith theory that you can get, potentially an off-ball linebacker. You get
dollar store Nolan Smith.
Yeah, you get an off-ball linebacker and you get a pass rusher. Really like Herbig. Herbig's got some really good hand usage at the top of his rush, man. Like he can really hit the apex too. He's flexible, a little bit bendy. I know he's a little undersized, so people
the length is my bigger concern over his size, because he got up to 240.
Can he set the edge?
Yeah, that's the biggest question.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I'm just going through the comments here. COVID year made all these prospects older. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, man, because because of the COVID years, we can't even really classify guys as like juniors, seniors. Like you've got like 4th year sophomore. Like it's all jacked up.
6-year seniors.
6-year seniors. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. Joey Porter has Brown on. He's going to Washington. Okay, that's interesting. The first round. This is interesting too. I think someone had Keanu Benton. Someone had Keanu Benton going like 32nd in a recent mock draft. One of the bigger names. Was it Daniel Jeremiah?
Daniel Jeremiah had Keanu Benton going at the end of the first round, and that's something I could see. Keanu Benton has been rising towards the end of the process. I think he goes before Brzee, actually, potentially.
That's really interesting. When I think about Benton, man, I think he's a really high floor prospect. He's a guy that we talked about a good amount over the last several months. Definitely, like I said, he's the guy, or one of the several guys, but probably the number one guy that I think just looks like a Steeler. I just think that if they have a way to acquire him, I really like it. He said DJ had him to Cincy. Benton, that is. Okay. I could see that as well.
Yeah.
That's an interesting pick.
That make a lot of sense. I comp him very similarly to BJ Hill of the Bengals, who they have there, but
Yeah.
I think he has, a little bit more upside maybe as a pass rusher than him
Sure.
with his hand usage.
Yeah. Let's see here. What can we get for pick 32? What are realistic trade options? Man, so here's the deal with pick 32, man. If they still have it by the end of the day, you got to think about it. Normally, when you're trying to make trades like this, you've got 10 minutes to make these trades. And granted, like teams have already done the preliminary research, like, hey, what would it take to get here? Or hey, what would you want if we were to swap picks? Like they've already had those preliminary conversations. 32 is different though, because you have 20 hours between the next Friday night draft night starts. So you're going to have all that time. Omar Khan's just going to be, answering phones. Hey, what do you want? What do you want? Because there's always those 2 or 3 guys, right, that fall out of the first round that we're like, man, how did this guy fall? Why did this guy fall? I know for me, the second night of the draft is always my favorite for that reason, because I love the value in day 2. To me, that's where the best teams become the best teams, is killing day 2 of the draft. So I think there's going to be a lot of options there. Like people are going to be calling up to try to potentially get that. But I wanted to ask,
add like another day
Go
2
ahead.
pick, potentially maybe get that add that 5th, 6th rounder that they're missing currently. Would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have a pick from 120 to like 240.
Day 3 is going to be very boring if they don't get a pick.
That's another reason why I mock the Kevin Dotson trade. Is just I just see, man, like I don't know if the Steelers are going to be able to wait that long between making picks, even if this isn't necessarily the draft where I'm like, I want all the day 3 picks. This is not that.
Corner class is too deep. They gotta get it on that.
Double dip. I do want to talk a little bit about just pick 32 though. Do the Steelers have pick 32 by the end of the day? I want your thoughts on that. Do they have it? Yes or no?
By the end of the day, I think so. I think they're going to wait and see who ends up falling. If they do trade up, a guy I'm going to keep in mind if they want to trade back into the first round, I think they like Mozzie Smith quite a bit. And I don't think he makes it past Buffalo. I think Buffalo is really eyeing him and Jack Campbell to fix, their interior, because they got absolutely mollywopped. Yes, mollywopped, all the adjectives in the run game. It was so bad against the Bengals.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mozzie, it's kind of funny. I was going through my Twitter timeline, and Josh Carney from Steelers Depot, he caught a little screenshot of the Steelers video, and Amar Khan was watching some Mozzie Smith film on his tablet, and I was like, oh, I would like, and I think about what Tony Pauline said about Mozzie Smith and their interest in saying he really liked him, and said if he was there at 32, they wouldn't hesitate, they'd take him there, and I'm like, the trade up makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that one scenario, I know I brought this up last night, I think as well, but one scenario that I think has been under discussed, and it's surprised me a little bit. And I know that Tomlin and Khan were both really open about potentially trading back out of 32. Like they were very blatant about saying that was going to be an option for them.
Yeah.
The possibility of trading up from 32. And, I think that's, a lot less likely, but I do think that could potentially happen. Especially for a guy like Mozzie Smith. You mentioned, I think Cincinnati ran for 175 yards against Buffalo last year in that playoff game. I mean, to me as a football fan, and I've said this in previous years about some Steelers losses that personally hurt me, to the core a little bit.
The Ravens one where J.K. Dobbins ran all over them.
Yes, dude, there is no worse feeling as a fan, but I know as a player and as a coach than just getting ran through. That is the most demoralizing way to lose. And I just think Buffalo, they're in that Super Bowl timeline. They've got a prime, franchise level quarterback. They got Stephon Diggs. They got a bunch of firepower over there. They gave Von Miller all that money last year in free agency. I think they're going to really look to address that. So Mozzie Smith and Jack Campbell both make a lot of sense there. there's something interesting here about my guy Mike that just brought up. I didn't know this. Maybe you
Ooh,
did.
I did
Gervon
not.
Dexter's trainer is Coach Dunbar's son. I really think he's going to be picked for us there at 80. I didn't know that, so that's rare, but that's a good point. I said this a month or two ago on Twitter. I feel like I think the Steelers, it would kind of surprise me a little bit if they left this draft without Mozzie Smith, Keanu Benton, or Gervon Dexter. Like
Agreed.
one of those three guys. I just think that they fit really that they're all variously different. Like Benton, some people like him at 0 tech, some people like him as a 3 tech. I personally view him more as a 3 tech, but he can play some nose. Mozzie Smith, your traditional nose tackle, really good athlete, especially for his size. I think one of the best block shedders, if not the best block shedder in the class. And then Gervon Dexter, my one-liner for him on my big board was literally a completely blank canvas.
Yes.
With all the tools that you could ask for. The dude does not have a pass rush plan. He doesn't really have a deep bag of moves, but if you just watch him move, there's not guys at that size that move like he can. And I think back to this rep against Kentucky from this past year, and Will Levis is a really good athlete, like a really good athlete, especially for a quarterback position. He tracked Levis down sideline to sideline on a scramble, and I was just like, this dude's a different type of mover for that size. And, with how
310 pounds too.
Yes. He's a big dude. Like this is not some like 290, undersized 3 tech. Like he's got NFL level size. I wish he was a little bit longer. I actually thought that he looked a little bit longer to me on film. I didn't think length was like a positive, but I thought he was a little bit longer. I was surprised with what he measured in at.
I think he holds the point of attack well with the long arm. I think when he tries to tackle with one arm, he doesn't always have that much success because he doesn't have as big of a radius as most guys. But I have such a conflicting feeling on Gervon Dexter because, like you said, blank canvas in terms of what you can develop him as.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could go anywhere from like second to like fourth round because I think there's a lot of mixed opinions on him. Dunbar is a guy I could trust to develop a guy like that. I think pick 80 makes so much sense for them. I would be a little skeptical though if they took him earlier than that.
Yeah. Jake said if they take a wide receiver at 27, are they truly serious anymore? I don't know, man. It does seem like the Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, even I've seen some people saying like maybe Josh Downs, like that's the very earliest that he could come off the board is 27 there for Buffalo. So that would be interesting. Frank dropped his own little mock in here. Joey Porter Jr. 17, Mozzie Smith at 32. Julius Prince at 49, so a double dip at cornerback.
I think this is realistic.
Yeah, I mean that's not that unrealistic, honestly. And to just full disclosure, I would not be upset with what you've got there. Mike said his upside's huge. He's a loud top pick for us. I agree. I think the upside's significant with Dexter. It's going to take some patience for him to get there, but
it's very different between him and Leal because Leal had like the NFL ready hand usage, but he lacks sand in his pants to hold up at the point of attack. Dexter is just so raw with his pass rush plan, and I think
he has the body that you want.
Yes, and he has the anchor too as a run defender. He just gets really tall in his pad level, and sometimes it doesn't even matter. He holds the point of attack even with that tall pad level. But you can fix a lot of the things you can. It's just you have to take him at the right spot because I have so much worries about guys who get compared to Chris Jones nowadays, especially after what happened with Javon Kinlaw, who has just been utter
brutal.
Oh I can't believe how bad he is against the run. He got destroyed against Philadelphia.
They attacked him. They just ran right at him over and over and over.
Yeah.
All right. If you guys have any last minute questions, it's time to get those in because it's 5 till 7. I gotta hop off here because I got company coming over, so I'm excited about that. Just real quick before we kind of wrap this thing up, please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. And my YouTube channel is up there as well, youtube.com/@allSteelersDB, Steelers_DB. Sorry. But yeah, please make sure you like the video. Make sure you sub to both channels. I know the All Steelers channel is going to have all type of content live from the facility. Noah's going to have you guys covered. I'm going to be dropping film rooms on all the draft picks. So I'm going to be a busy man after all these picks. It's It's going to be a busy weekend. Nick's going to have, a lot of content coming as well. So you guys are not going to want to miss this stuff. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, all that stuff, because we'll have more analysis just like this throughout the weekend. Somebody said Witherspoon has that personality to hold a defense together. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Witherspoon earlier, and I mentioned how I think that he just plays every down like it's his absolute last play on earth. And I think that he's a guy that if you were to bring him into the facility, I think people would literally die for him. Like it sounds dramatic, but I really do think just people would just gravitate so easily to him. You just look at him on film, man. Like the dude he hits, he plays hard, he's physical, he's a trash talker. He has the exact type of mentality that you want in a first round pick. So he checks a lot of boxes for the Steelers, and the ball skills. We know how much they really like that as well. So I want to ask you before we jump off here though, Nick, give me your first round pick. I know you did a mock draft, but I don't know if we've said who your first round pick was going to be at 17. And then I'm going to ask you the same thing I've asked everybody else. Give me your 3 guys that are Pittsburgh Steelers by the end of the weekend. Doesn't have to be like any specific pick. Just give me your 3 guys if you had to bet, money on their Pittsburgh Steelers by the time we get there Sunday night.
Okay, so for first round pick, I'm just gonna stick with Deonte Banks. I believe that the interest is there. I believe he fits their mold a lot, and I think the tackle run's gonna be too brutal. Do they move up for Paris Johnson? It's very possible. We'll see what ends up happening there. As for guys I think are almost guaranteed to be Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm on board with Nick Herbig as a Pittsburgh Steeler like every single time. Like pick 80 is probably where it's going to happen. It makes a lot of sense from them needing a third pass rusher, from them needing an off-ball linebacker. It makes a lot of sense. I think there's a chance that Keanu Benton goes before Brian Brzee. So I'm a little split on whether or not it's going to be Benton or Brzee as their second round pick. I'm going to go with Brzee, actually. I think he's a guy that has a lot of connections to the Steelers. Tomlin's known him for a very long while. There's a lot of upside there as a guy that can, mold. There's definitely things he needs to fix double team wise against the run.
Mm-hmm.
But the upside
pad level.
Upside is absolutely tremendous though. And I definitely could see it. After that, I think I'm going to go Ricky Stromberg at 120. I just think Ricky Stromberg fits their mold of a center. And I think it gives them the urgency of developing a guy and also showing faith in Mason Cole as a short-term stopgap. And I think, with Stromberg, you have the potential to really develop him. And he could be a lot better than his draft projection because he's an unreal athlete. There's a lot of power to his game. He can pull really effectively. He's an excellent reach blocker. I don't think he gets enough credit for that in terms of his ability to reach nose tackles. And again, I just think he needs to work on dropping his head less. He's a little too aggressive. He likes to drop his head. It makes him very vulnerable to swims, spins especially. But the upside is tremendous. I think there's a real good chance that he ends up being a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, totally agree, man. Yeah, Dorian Williams, Nick Herbig, those are like 2 of my favorite, like round 3, round 4 type of guys.
I was stuck between Dorian Williams and Herbig, but I think Williams might go early in the 3rd.
It's not a good linebacker class, man. So it wouldn't surprise me if that actually ended up taking place. Just in terms of Stromberg, man, I know we talked about him a lot, but just the ability to explode out of his stance, reach blocks, second level, ability as a puller. I just think like if you're looking at a guy that could be a potential upgrade to Mason Cole, who's a fine stopgap option, you want to upgrade that position athletically.
Yes.
In the years to come, I think that Ricky Stromberg really looks like that type of player for me. So
stout in the lower half too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah, he can anchor and pass pro. Like this is a really good player and somebody that I think we're going to be looking back on. Someone asked me a question about that, about who's the guy that we look back on like day 3 of the draft that we're like, just how the hell did this dude fall this far? And like Stromberg was the guy for me. I think that's going to. There could be a number of different corners that fall that low. I think Clark Phillips is an interesting name because I
Yeah.
do think that there's a potential, that his size and just testing numbers, knock him down significantly from where he was getting mocked earlier in the process. But Phillips is a guy that I think if you put him in the slot with those ball skills, the play recognition, how feisty and physical he can be despite his size, if he cleans up the tackling, I think he can be a really solid slot corner and somebody that, we look back on and say like, yeah, we overthought this one. And I know you like Phillips as well.
Yes, I really like Clark Phillips. In terms of just guys falling that might not seem like falls at the time, but they could be looked back on. I think Alex Austin from Oregon State is going to go much later than people expect. And I just think he's a guy, he reminds me a lot of Jalen Watson last year, who ended up being very key contributor for the Chiefs. Got taken in the 7th round. Alex Austin has some really good reps and off coverage, really twitchy feet overall, and he's got some good feel and press coverage. He's aggressive as a tackler. There's some really good stuff on film with him, and honestly, he caught my eye more than Rajon Wright did. I ended up watching Austin more than Wright overall, so I didn't rank Wright on my board, but Austin, I think he's a guy we look back on and was just like, why weren't we higher on him?
Right.
And
100%. Yeah, both those Oregon State guys, man, big, long, they really, really nice players. I noticed both of them. I watched that USC game against Jordan Addison. I watched that one a couple different times. So
Austin went up against Brendan Rice a little more, and Brendan Rice has a potential to be a breakout player next year. So keep an eye on him as well.
Yeah, I mean they got some guys over there. USC, Mario Williams. Yeah, definitely some dudes. I wanted one more question, because I know we're running over time here, but wanted one more question with you. Give me your favorite, because I know you and I are both on the same page here about double dipping at cornerback. And I really, really want this to happen, but give me your favorite double dip cornerback scenario.
Oh, man.
Putting you on the spot to end the stream.
All right. I said this one on Twitter, but I'm going to change it up slightly. I like Deontay Banks at 17 a lot. But man, if they took Corey Trice on day 2 to pair with Deontay Banks, I would run through a freaking wall, man. Corey Trice is so good as a press man corner, and he has got the chops to be able to survive in off coverage. His zone eyes are terrific.
Very good in zone.
Yes.
Very good in zone. That was one of the things I noticed.
Yes. I like that guy a lot, and I think you pair him with Banks, who I think is a very scheme fluid corner in terms of what you could do with him as a press man corner, as an off man corner. Corey Trice, cornerback 7. I have him as 10. I wish I could have put him higher, but I had to stop the line somewhere with him. And Trice actually reminds me a lot of Martin Emerson last year, who I liked quite a bit.
Had a good rookie year.
I ranked him lower than I probably should have, but that's how I feel about Corey Trice this year. I think he's a guy who's just going to be very good. Banks and Keitrell Clark. Yeah, I like that. I like that pairing too. There's a lot of ways they can come away with a really good cornerback pairing. But for me, I almost want them to come away with 2 boundary corners, because how many times is it that you can get 2 outside corners that you feel really comfortable about in an NFL draft? Like,
this is the one. This is the one.
Exactly. Give me it. Give me my dream.
Yeah, man. Like, this is we talked about this when we did our cornerback draft ranking show. Like, if your team needs a cornerback, you need to take 2. Even if you don't need a cornerback, you need to take 1 anyway.
Take 3.
Yeah, take 3. This is a really deep class, man. When I think about the Steelers per se, I would agree that Deontay Banks is 17. You could go a number of different ways here. You could convince me on Corey Trice at like 80, maybe even 49.
Yeah.
You could convince me to get Julius Brents a little bit later. You could convince me to even I'm going to even say you could convince me to get Tyreek Stevenson if he was a pick at like 49 after you already took Banks at 17. But I really think man, one of my favorite scenarios is getting Banks and then getting like Brian Branch at 32.
Yeah, I like that.
Quan Martin at 49. Keitrell Clark later in the draft, round 3 through 5 in the middle rounds. And then I've just brought him up, but I think he's going to fall more than people are expecting, Clark Phillips. But, man, you talk about just ball skills. I really, really think that Clark Phillips in the slot as a cover guy, because you look at what happened last year with teams just kind of really targeting Arthur Maulet, like in the middle of the season, to the point where, they had to start playing him less as the season went on.
Yeah.
Who's the Steelers slot corner right now? I don't know. I mean, it's Maulet on early downs, but who is playing? Because Cam Sutton's gone. He was sliding inside while they would bring, Wallace and even, other guys to the boundary, James Pierre. Like, I don't know what the Steelers' plan is. That's what makes it interesting to me when we talk about could they be interested in, a guy like Brian Branch if he was to fall to 32? Could that even take precedent over taking a corner at 32 if they're really comfortable with taking a Brent or a Tyreek Stevenson at 49 and just praying that one of those guys were there? It's all interesting, but I do agree, man. Like, that's the one thing. If you were to ask me, what needs to happen for the Steelers to have, a really good draft, I want 2 corners. Like, if you do that for me, I will be eternally grateful, and I'll be really excited about that. Someone DM me this on Twitter, and this is the last question that I'm going to take before we hop off here, because I know we both got to get going. In order for the Steelers to have a successful draft, which is kind of what I just mentioned, they need to do what? And then another follow-up question was, what's the doomsday scenario for the Steelers in this draft class? Like, what can they not leave I'm guessing this is what the question was. What can they not leave the draft without, in your opinion?
Okay, so for me, I think they need to double down on corner no matter what. They do that. That makes me content on their draft. As like a position they can't leave without, it's corner. It's corner. They can leave, like, in my opinion, I think they could take interior offensive linemen and maybe not come away with an offensive tackle, and I would feel maybe a little bit more comfortable than most people, because I think offensive tackle is a very careful situation in terms of, can you reach on a guy later, and because they want to take one early, but they might not be able to because the value just might not line up. So for me, corner's a must. They just got to come away with a corner. If they don't, then I don't even know what to say if they don't come away with the corner in this class.
Yeah, I think, that to me, I'm completely on board. I think that you absolutely, under no circumstance, can come out of this draft without a guy that you are comfortable with as a starting boundary corner for the future.
Agreed.
Like, he has to be capable of playing, as early as as late. I'll say as late as next year. Like, you have to take a corner with the first, if they come away out of day 2 without a corner, I'm losing my mind. Even though I like the depth, cornerback position is one of the few in this draft where you can probably still get good, solid players in the 3rd and 4th, maybe even 5th round. Cornerback, man, that's the one thing that has to happen. And the doomsday scenario for me is the flip side of that they push it off, and we try to see them, grab some bargain bin shopping options, like, your Levi Wallace's, your Akilla Witherspoons, maybe Patrick Peterson, is able to give it, 2 more years, even though I think that this is probably his last year playing corner, just in my opinion. But yeah, we appreciate you guys all, coming in, chopping it up with us for the pre-draft special. I speak
all
for
season
Nick.
long, man.
Yes, and I speak for Nick too. All of your all support throughout the entire draft cycle was a blast. I know that many of you guys have watched the All Steelers Draft Talk pod that me and Nick have been doing since, October, November. Really appreciative of all the support that we've got with that. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to us ramble about draft prospects as much as, we enjoyed giving you guys our takes. So just please make sure, you like the video. Make sure, of course, you subscribe to the All Steelers Talk YouTube channel, and then subscribe to my channel as well at Steelers_DB. We will holler at you guys. Please make sure you follow us on Twitter, follow the site. We're going to have tons of content over the next 3-4 days. And I'm really excited to watch how this weekend unfolds. So we'll holler at you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.